Hello, folks. Bill and Brian here with Energy Road. Today, we're going to talk about hurricanes. Hey, Brian, let's roll the logo.
Okay.
Hello, folks. We're going to talk about a subject today that Brian and I have actually personal experience with, having both of us lived in Houston. In fact, Brian, I was trying to think, how has this impacted your life? Yeah, I think you named a child after a hurricane.
Yes.
Or was that a tropical storm? I can't remember.
No, it was a tropical storm, but we have an experience with hurricanes, and it actually trends my family. My great-grandparents actually met in the storm in 1900 in Galveston.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize we had that connection because I have a grandfather who went down and built the seawall.
Yeah, afterward they did. Yeah. But Bill and I were talking. We were talking about the markets. We were talking about weather and how that impacts things. And of course, natural gas has a lot of integrated components on weather. And hurricanes have been interesting because over the last 30 years, they kind of evolved into a potential supply disruption event. And the lens has shifted. And part of the reason that we wanted to do this live session today is we've had some questions about hurricane activity. And I think, Bill, didn't you say that we are expecting a greater than normal hurricane season?
Right. And some of the weather people we talked to, and by the way, just a shout out to Prestige Weather because they have been helping us understand this really well. Because when the Gulf gets above like 80 degrees, I believe is the temperature, and it's warm like that, that causes the instability for hurricanes to form. And so this year they're expecting to have somewhere. This is what I love about the NOAA. They really have their spreads pretty wide. They're saying that we're going to have anywhere from 11 to 25 named storms. Okay, what that means is that includes tropical storms.
Wait, how many?
11 to 25.
Wow.
And so that means that a tropical storm is anytime it's over above 39 miles an hour, the storm gets named. Right. So that's it. So what they say, though, we're going to have between 6 and 11 hurricanes. And of those 6 to 11 hurricanes, 2 to 5 of them will be major storms. What that means is that they have winds, sustainable winds above 111 miles an hour.
Yep.
So, and I believe that's three. I believe it starts at 139 miles an hour or 111 miles an hour. So, so we're expecting, or at least NOAA is expecting, and because they are expecting, we are expecting higher activity in the Gulf for hurricanes.
Right.
And a lot of it has to do with the warmth of the Gulf, but there's going to be interesting other weather patterns develop, and we'll have more about that later. But that includes the El Nino and the temperature off the coast of Africa. So, see, when you talk to us at Energy Road, you never know what you're going to be talking about.
Well,
so let's talk about what happens. Let's talk about why that affects the demand and supply so much. Brian, let's talk about our wonderful chart that you can get at Energy Road, and if you sign up for $89 a month, you too can have access to such fine looking charts and activities. That's what Brian's about to show you.
Yes. So our platform is $89 a month, and you have access to over 150 charts that cover fundamentals, supply, demand, imports, exports, storage, stocks, and we cover oil, natural gas liquids, and some on electricity, soon to have coal, and soon to have other products. We do have artificial intelligence, but I I diminish that because you have to have a high statistical correlation to history. And anybody that has watched a natural gas price chart, you can't project the wild swings. But anyhow, we have a lot of charts there. You can click a meeting down below. You can reach out to us. And if you can book a meeting with Bill and I, we'll walk you through the platform. If it's for you, great. If it's not, that's fine too. So the main focus of today is historically over the last 30 to 40 years, anytime there was a hurricane, there was so much production offshore in the Gulf of Mexico. That's where the supply source on the supply side of the equation. Oh, all our charts are interactive and downloadable, by the way. But most of our production, or actually no, 40, I'd say 40% of our production used to come from the Gulf of Mexico years ago. So anytime a storm came, they would have to shut in production. That was a big supply shock. So that drove prices up. Historically, over time, anytime a hurricane came, prices would go up. So what we're going to talk about is the lens has changed. Over 90% of our production of this 102 BCF a day is the last week's numbers as of Thursday, and tomorrow this will be updated to a new number. Over 90% of this comes from onshore places. So that means a hurricane does not disrupt supply. But what it does disrupt and can disrupt is now on the demand side of the equation. So all these charts are on Rogue Edge. If you have interest, click a link down below, find out a little bit more. But let me just show you something that shows what LNG exports looked like over history. So our net, this is actually net because we have imports, believe it or not, and exports. But back in 2016, we were actually importing LNG. We've switched to over 12 BCF a day. So think about that number, 12 versus 102. So over, I'd say 11.5% of our supply is dedicated to this LNG exports right here. So you can see 12.1 BCF a day. We could probably add another 2 BCF of capacity. But if you take a look at where hurricanes, and this is what I saw this morning. This is part of the reason that we wanted to have this session. You can see that there's a potential, there's 3 places the National Ocean, I always have a hard time, Oceanic,
Call it NOAA.
thank you. What Bill said. And we do watch our comments. So if you have comments, you can watch you can drop a comment and we'll address it. But there's 3 areas NOAA is watching. One in the Gulf of Mexico, and the other are coming off the Africa coast, which a lot of the winds carry it up, and kind of depends on some of the jet streams and whatnot. But if
So typically hurricanes actually create off the African coast. They move across the Atlantic into the Gulf. They either go north or south of Cuba, and then when they get there, now a lot of them, by the time they get to Cuba, they're veer up the East Coast, and then you have the ones that go through the Gulf. And so it's the warm water off the coast of Africa that causes that. And so right now the water off the coast of Africa is extremely warm, like the Gulf Coast is, and that's why those are 2 areas they're looking at.
Right. And these, since they travel so far, they gain momentum. When they develop here, it doesn't have quite as much wind building into the storm as it centralizes, or at least that's been my historical understanding. Our friends at Prestige Weather can definitely help you out with that. But what I want to take a look at is this 12 BCF a day. What does that mean? Out of a supply demand mix, which is roughly 12% of our demand last week went to LNG, 2 BCF a day would move the market. and that gets injected back in there. If you have hurricanes that come into the Gulf Coast, I want you to look at this. A large portion of that 12 BCF a day comes from this particular region. I'm trying to click off this. Let me click off this. This is on marine vessel traffic. So these include crude oil tankers and LNG tankers. But the three areas to watch: Corpus Christi, Freeport, which is right down here, and you've got a little in the Houston area, but then over here in the Beaumont area, that's when you're going to get more LNG because of Cheniere's Sabine Pass. So if you throw a hurricane into the Gulf of Mexico, it disrupts all these ships. That includes crude oil ships and LNG ships. And
So let's talk
ahead.
about that for a second. One of the things it does, it delays the shipping. Okay.
Right.
So the ships are not going to go through a hurricane.
Yep.
They're smarter than that. They're going to go around it. And so that delays the shipping. But the biggest problem is as it comes on shore, it could actually destroy the shore facilities. And now you're talking about months to rebuild, not just a few days delay. So that's why you watch for those hurricanes. So that's it's what there's and Brian's about to tell you this, is that when these hurricanes come on shore, it's not the supply that gets erupted, it's the demand.
Yes. So when we take a look at that 12 BCF a day that we looked at right here, is 12 BCF a day, most of it, I'd probably say 10 of it comes from over here. Maybe 9 to 10 of it. So the majority of our LNG exports come from there. So the ships have to go around. That's one thing. But the other is when these come across, and this equates to 3 ships a day. 3 ships a day need to go in and out, in and out, in and out every day. So these hurricanes can disrupt shipping flows, which might delay pickups, which means we have to inject more in storage. And there's only so much storage that LNG facilities can have on site. They do have plenty. Fortunately, they're run by very bright people. I'm friends with Corey Grindle over at Cheniere. Phenomenal, intelligent, and I'm just thankful that you have somebody that intelligent running the supply portfolio and the export portfolio for Cheniere. But these hurricanes could disrupt ships. And this path right here, this is from Hurricane Rita, which was 2005. During that hurricane, it was scheduled to hit Houston, but it went slightly over here to the Beaumont area. It went to this area over here. And because of that, this is where some of the largest NGL infrastructure in the United States exists. It's a location called Mont Belvieu, which is East Houston.
Right.
And because of Rita, believe it or not, these disruptions matter. Because of Rita disrupting NGL flows. Let's see if it has states up here. No, it doesn't, but production up in this area, up in Wyoming. Let's see, am I in Wyoming? Yeah, right here. Production in this area got shut in. So because of a hurricane down here, production in Wyoming got shut in because there wasn't enough places to fractionate NGLs. So the complex down in this Gulf Coast, it's not just the ships, it's the interconnectivity, because if you can't strip out that the NGLs, it does become a supply event. Then we have what we had in COVID, which is a demand shock and a supply shock at the same time. So that's why COVID was so wild, because it was demand and supply at the same time.
And so the other side of the demand shock is the fact that most of the power down here is run off of natural gas.
Right.
And so when the power goes down, that means they're not burning natural gas. And so it takes them several days to get their power lines back up, to get everything back up. And so that's the demand destruction. And so that's why you see the hurricanes, which traditionally had been a supply problem because of the amount of natural gas we had in the Gulf of Mexico, because the prices are so far down. It's really not very. They're not many people are incented to drill out there right now. But the has changed from a supply problem to a demand problem, and that demand problem literally backs up the opposite direction, going north, so that because they have nowhere to put the gas because the demand is down. And
And so
so, especially with LNG, if you can't get LNG out, I mean, you start saying, "Hey, listen, we got a 2 BCF a day interruption," the markets will tank.
right. And what you can see, and I'm using some of the charts that you could have access to for only $89 a month. The
At where, Brian? EnergyRogue.com, right?
energyrogue.com. Yes, we're going to be cheesy that way. So if you take a look at our weekly injections, what this will do is back up and increase volume and storage, which if it increases in storage, if we get back to this supply demand balance and you have a disruption on potentially 10 BCF a day of the 100, last week was 100 BCF a day of demand. Now we're talking about a 10% market, and that 10% has to go back into storage. That 10%, now 10 BCF a day, that would add increased storage. I mean, 7 days is 70 BCF a day. At our peaks, we inject on a week. That would add 70 BCF on an average week when we're filling storage is probably maybe 30, 40. I think tomorrow is scheduled to be around 28 BCF a day. You add 70 to that mix, now we're up over 100.
Well, and then,
That's going to potentially move the markets
but you really can't
down.
add. You really can't add to it, Brian, because those storage caverns they have a capacity limit of how much they can put in.
Right.
And if you try to double what's going in at going from 30 to 60 BCF, they won't be able to get it all in storage.
So what that means, and you can go ahead and ignore all the lines I have on my chart. I do some trading for myself and some clients. So I'm not a financial advisor. So anything we say there is do not construe it as financial advice.
We just do some
We're
analysis for people.
we knew analysis and strategy. But if you ignore these lines, what this means is we might have sharp drops. If we have a hurricane that comes in, demand will be impacted. If we get back to this supply demand mix, demand's going to be impacted, which is going to increase the amount of storage injections, which means we're going to have more supply. And so more supply than demand. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. And I would say I would definitely take a look at this map. It's marinevesseltraffic.com. I think they sell some of this data. We don't have an affiliation with them. It's just a website that I was able to find where you could identify what type of ship these are, which is actually pretty interesting.
So, and also, if you really want to follow the weather a little bit closer with some guys who've got some insight, the Prestige Weather guys are really good, and they can talk to what these warmer temperatures do, warmer surface temperatures on the ocean do, as far as what the weather patterns change, how the weather patterns change.
Well, and I think the end of the where I'd like to close off, and we'll close off over the next couple minutes. If anybody has any questions, feel free to fire them out. We should be able to see them. If we don't see them live, we'll respond after. But where I want to close off is 10% of our supply is potentially disrupted if hurricanes enter the Gulf of Mexico, or 10% of our demand. I'm sorry, 10% of our demand potentially gets impacted, and that is
So the worst case scenario, if a hurricane came up the coast, if it goes into one area or the other, it's going to leave some areas untouched.
right.
And so it's going to take. It's not. I don't want to put a super scare out there that we're going to lose 10 BCF of demand, because that would have to be a different type of storm than what we've seen in the past.
Right.
But at any time, even if we lose 2 BCF, that impacts the market.
Yep. So let's see. I haven't seen any questions come across, but I think this might be a good place to kind of close off. And again, where we're closing off is if 10% of our demand center comes from this LNG exports right down here, and you look at the path of where potential storms may go in the Gulf of Mexico and historical storms alongside crude oil, it is going to impact crude oil markets. We now export quite a bit of crude oil, like over 6 million barrels a day, and a lot of it comes right through Houston. So if we have hurricanes that hit up through Houston, this is going to be a very interesting hurricane season. So,
All right, folks, reach out and schedule a meeting with us. Contact us. Sign up, subscribe, do all the various things you can do for us, because we want to keep coming back to you. And the biggest thing you can do is just sign up for Rogue Edge. We'll make it worth your while.
Yeah. Sign up for Rogue Edge. Do like, subscribe, comment, all that stuff. And we do try and reply to all the comments. We're sometimes not able to get to everybody, but we definitely will try. And if you have a very specific question, reach out to us. We're here. You can book a meeting with us. It's totally free. And you can learn a little bit about Rogue Edge. And that helps us keep this channel active, and that helps us go along. And we really appreciate you watching, and we hope to hear from you soon. You knew I had to say that, right?
I know, yeah, I know. And so, just like in drilling, we always say turn to the right. Just remember hurricanes, man, they turn to the right too.
Yes. So anyway, we're going to go ahead and close off, but reach out to us down below. This will be out there if you want to rewatch it and you want to learn a little bit more. Reach out to us and connect with us. And with that, we'll close it off from there. See you, folks. Anyone who signs up today gets a free t-shirt.
That's right. Now's your
Today,
chance. Special offer at the end of the logo.
August 16th. Anybody who signs up today, you got to send me an email. Sign up today, and we'll see you soon.